Today is 5/18/2024, 12:53, and I'm here with.
James Spencer.
And what was your occupation?
I retired as port captain for Clean Seas, which was an offshore oil spill response company. Prior to that, 38 years in the oil patch, and prior to that, I spent about 12 years as a young guy fishing in Morro Bay. I was through high school.
Was that commercial fishing?
Started out sport fishing. That all, I don't know how that transpired. I came up here to visit my father. My grandmother was in Cayucas in the 30s. She moved to Morro Bay in the 40s. And my grandfather. My grandmother was in Morro Bay during World War II when the Montebello blew up, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the Montebello. Anyway, my parents separated when I was in teenage years, and my father ended up here, and I came up to visit I think it was like on spring break. Came up to visit on spring break, and he took me fishing on one of the sport boats. He was a sign painter, and he would letter the boats, and he would get comp tickets, and he knew everybody on the waterfront, so he took me fishing. And first time I'd ever been out on a boat, and I don't know, there was 7 or 8 people on the boat, and probably fished 20-minute rock and had nice sacks of fish, and we're back at the dock, and Mike Graham, who was the captain of the boat, said, "Hey, if I come back in the summer, give me a job." So I went back to Anaheim, where I was from, and that was probably in the 9th grade. So then after the 10th grade, somewhere in the 10th grade, I came up and started working on the sport boats.
Did you finish? You went back in the summers up here, and you finished your education. And when did you move up here?
I moved up here my senior year of high school. I worked one summer, maybe 70, worked that summer up here, went back home, finished my junior year. That summer came back up, and then I stayed. And
you stayed. Nice area, like beautiful, or just because
well, in Morro Bay High School. Back then, Morro Bay High School was the middle school too. Then it was 7th grade all the way to the 12th, and they had the junior high kids, and then they had the senior high kids. And total, there was about 900 students. That was 7th grade all the way through 12th. And I graduated Morro Bay High School in 1972, along with Mark Toglizzini and John French and a bunch of these guys. Randy Can was in a class. I think of some more names. Freddie Tomlinson, a lot of guys that were fishing. And after graduating from high school, I had no desire to go to junior college. Cuesta College was nothing but Army barracks. And when we went out and did the class tour of Cal Poly, and then we did the senior class, we went to Cuesta College, and it was old Army barracks, and it was just hot and dusty. And it was like, no thanks. Anyway, instead of going to school, I just kept fishing on the sport boat with Mike. And when the summer was over and the kids were back in school, that's when all the other adults, retired people, would get on the road, from September all the way up until December. And as you know, being around here in the fall, we get the end of the summer, it's nice weather, and just continued fishing.
And it was a sport
fishing. Yeah, sport fishing. And I worked with a guy, like I said, Mike Graham, and to me, he was an old guy. He was like 27 years old. He was old, 27. And I worked with him that year, and then winter came. And of course, when the winter comes, things slow down. Instead of fishing, summertime, you're fishing 7 days a week. You know, things start slowing down. Maybe you get out 5 or 6 days a week. Well, in the wintertime, when things start slowing down, the people aren't there. You might only get out on 2 days a week, or maybe 1 day a week on the weekends if you had a charter. Excuse me. And about that time, you know, the paychecks are a lot smaller. Well, Mike is looking at his paycheck and he knows how much it's supposed to be, and it isn't what it's supposed to be. He was getting paid off the bottom and not off the top. He was getting paid after the expenses. Okay, so that he kind of had a rift with his parents, or his stepdad, and so there was a falling out, and he quit, and I went with him, and we went on a search to find a sport boat, and we looked at boats all the way from Bodega Bay all the way to San Diego for just a sport boat, day boat out of here. And as it turns out, we come back home, and this went on for several months. We ended up buying the Flyer from Mike St. John, who was, had a boat 50 yards down from our landing, and Mike was going to retire. He cut us a deal. There was 3 of us. We needed to come up with $5,000 for a down payment. I had some money that I had saved for a car. Well, instead of buying a car, I used that money for a down payment on a boat with 2 other guys, and we went into business. And we moved down to Breb's Landing, which is where DeGarmore is at right now.
You're about 20, 21 maybe at the time?
1920, about 19 or 20. And there was another boat there called the Mallard, and Bob Gannon was running that. He was an all-day guy, all-day boat, bigger boat. People like bigger boats. The Flyer was only a 42-footer. Anyway, Mike put a schedule up, a 3/4 day boat. Back then, boats would leave at 7. All the boats. There was probably a dozen or more boats on the waterfront. Probably 6 or 7 landings. Everybody left at 7 and came back around 2:30 or 3. Anyway, to compete with another larger boat at the dock, Mike made a 3/4 day boat. We'd leave at 7 and be back at 1:30. And then we also did, when the weather was permitting, we'd do afternoon trips or twilight trips. And then things started to evolve, and then, I'm familiar with Fast Eddie, you probably heard his name come up. He was one of the guys that was really instrumental with Joe Giannini getting Measure D passed, decades later. And he was going to build, he had an investor up in Seattle. And he was going to, they built a brand new boat, Sea Venture 1, going to bring it down. They were going to build the Sea Venture 2, and he'd run that boat. Meanwhile, I would get my ocean operator's license. I used to call it ocean operator back then. Now they're master's captain's license, or Anyway, I was going to run the Sea Venture 1, and he'd run the Sea Venture 2. Well, everything changed, and it's feast or famine. One time there was 4 boats out of there, out of the landing, and we were all shuffling for spot to load the boats and stuff, and things changed. And anyway, I went to work for Fast Eddie. At that time, I was probably about 20.
And kind of backtracking a little bit, what got you so interested in this fishing business? Did your parents or grandparents ever have, did they ever have experience going out fishing, and just why did you really latch onto that?
Well, the first memory I have is I was probably about 8 years old, and at that time I came up with my dad, and he'd go fishing with my grandfather. They'd go out with Bob Gannon on the Mallard, and I'd just hang out with my grandmother during the day, and I remember them coming back, and this big old gunny sacks of fish and nice vermilion reds getting cut in the backyard. And I'd probably spend 4 or 5 days here, and my grandmother would take me up to Cayucas Pier, and we'd catch the little red snappers. You know, they don't do it anymore, but you know, all these little juvenile fish. You just fill up a bucket of those and you bring them home and cut the heads off and fry them and eat them like a lollipop. And then in the evening, grandmother would take me down to the T pier in the evening with the Coleman lantern and a jug of hot chocolate and some snacks and cookies, and we'd sit on the South T pier and throw crab rings off the pier, and you could, you know, catch dozens of crabs, you know, keep the claws and throw them back.
They were red rock or Dungeness?
No, just rock crabs. Yeah, rock crabs. And that's my first vivid memory of coming to Morro Bay. I was about 8 years old. And then it would trickle up, you know, vacations later in the years. But yeah, my grandfather just sport fishing. But with that said, down on the waterfront was a restaurant called The Galley. Bill and Florence Wilson owned The Galley in the late 50s all the way up until the mid 60s. I want to say about 1966. And they sold it to Bud Anderson and Rita, the Anderson family, which is legend around here. They sold the Galley restaurant to the Andersons in about 1966. My grandmother would help Florence in the cafe. Actually, it was a cafe. Somewhere I got a menu out here from, you know, abalone burgers were like 45 cents. Mm-hmm. Anyway, my grandmother would help Florence in the cafe, and my grandfather would cut fish for Bill Wilson, who also was a fisherman. So that's kind of how that went.
And so just grew up around fishing and just loved it. And
myself?
Yeah. Did you ever work in the restaurant, like help out with that, or?
No, no. That was I was too young for that. But before back when I was 14, living in Anaheim, actually I worked at Angel Stadium as a hawker, selling roasted peanuts or ice cold Coke. And for being a young guy, the bigger the crowd, the more you sold, the more you made. If you hustled, you could make some money, and that was. So I did that for a few years right before coming up to Morro Bay here. But so that was because you could work at Angel Stadium at 14 years old.
And that was like 1960.
That was
67.
Probably 67, 68. Yeah, we'll try to do the math. 67, 68.
Cool.
Yeah, back then it was the Big A. It was the Big A. You know, it was a relatively new stadium. Mm-hmm. And actually, rewind, my father worked for the city of Anaheim. And so the groundbreaking for this big infrastructure project, you know, Angel Stadium, when they finally found the property, my mom drugged my sister and I to the groundbreaking for this Angel Stadium, which is, you know, a couple miles down from Disneyland. You know, I think Disneyland opened in like 1955. Anyway, my dad working for the city of Anaheim, after the groundbreaking was over, he managed to get the survey marker from Home Plate. That thing sat in our garage there in Anaheim for a gazillion years, and when my mom passed away, going through the garage, I could not find that survey marker for Home Plate. So anyway, fast forward, you know, roll ahead. Yeah, ended up in Morro Bay on the boats, and it was fun. It was fun. After school, after high school, I'd go down and I'd scrub the boat. And I helped Mike. I would rat fish for Mike, because when school was out was about the time the boat was coming in, and he'd be cutting fish and I'd bag, and then when we get done bagging the fish, I'd go down and scrub the boat. So I always had some fun tickets in my wallet.
Well, I guess kind of growing up here, the latter half of your youth, growing up in Morro Bay, what did it look like? Like, could you describe, was the entrance was already sealed, this north entrance?
Yes.
And did the Embarcadero look the same? You know, downtown, how was that? what did the harbor look like?
The harbor was pretty much all the same. You know, there wasn't, you know, a lot of older buildings, and some of there was several little sport fishing kiosks, like by the South T Pier. Had the Sarda Sarda and the Lucky Strike. Those were individual guys. Then you rolled over to what was Port Morrow at the time. Had some sport landings. And then right about where the Fisherman's Anchor is, just south of what is now Giovanni's, was Mike's Landing, who had the flyer. And basically, when I say a landing, it was a dock about the length of the boat and a little ramp going down across the riprap. Go down one building, there was the Four Crabs, which was a little fish and chip joint. And then next to that was Graham's Landing and the Beachcomber Restaurant, which had the San Mateo, was the first boat I went on. And they also had a boat called the Sabre. And then right next door to that was the Galley Restaurant. By the time I started working on the boats, the Galley Restaurant was owned by the Andersons. And I remember down there scrubbing the boat in the afternoon, and Bud Anderson being out there welcoming the guests in. Anyway, we kind of had this common bond because of Bill and Florence Wilson. Bill was like they were like my godparents. And then you move on down, then there was I think Bob's Landing came in eventually, and Rose's Landing, which I think was also maybe Hart's Landing, that had the Mallard at one time, and then Fifth Street Landing, which had the Captain Midnight. Make a U-turn, go back up to the South T Pier, up to the Harbor Hut was Verge's Landing that had, 5 or 6 boats. My senior year in high school is when the city of Morro Bay, their big infrastructure project, was putting in curbs and sidewalks along the Embarcadero.
So was it just dirt road?
It was paved road, but all these stores and restaurants. I mean, a lot of those, like the surf shop, wasn't there. That was just in the art gallery. That was just a dirt lot. But like pulling up to the restaurant, there was just a telephone pole that was a bumper where you just pull up to the telephone pole, and you get out and step over the telephone pole and you go in the front door. So yeah, curbs and sidewalks. That was about 1971, 72.
And so they still had, you're describing like those slips or ramps, like they still had ramps right going between the restaurants, like to go down to the dock, like to put boats in?
Yeah, to the boats. Yeah, they were just little owner operator, just a wooden ramp and a dock with some floats. Yeah, and they would, like anything else, you can get beat up in the wintertime.
Yeah, and you keep mentioning all these sport fishing, but I didn't know that there was so many. And is it kind of continued like that, like a lot of sport fishing, or has it gone down?
Oh no, it's way slower than it used to be. At one time, there was a lot of activity. There was a lot of activity, and a lot of boats, and a lot of owner operators, just owner operators. And back then, actually, the limit for fish was 20 rockfish. When I started, was 20 rockfish, and then 10 of the other species like cabezon and lingcod. So basically, yeah, you could have 30 fish on a good fishing day, and I mean, you could have 2 big gunny sacks full of fish. And then fast forward to when I got my quote unquote captain's license in the end of 1974.
And did you go up to San Francisco to get that? Just
yep.
like
Crawford Nautical School. Frank Brebs, who was one of the early families here with the abalone industry, had the fish market, which is now Giovanni's. They had the restaurant, and they had the tackle shop. They had the fuel dock, and the ice house. Anyway, when the sport boats were going to develop, and I go back to Fast Steady with the Sea Venture 1, the Sea Venture 2, they wanted me to get my license. Frank Brebs co-signed a loan for $1,000 for me, to where I could pay my rent up on Madeira, which was $85 a month. That was enough to pay the tuition in San Francisco. The tuition for the school back then was $175. It was a 3-week class. But that would also pay for a hotel, because I stayed in a hotel and paid, I don't know, $24 a night or something like that, which was a lot, you know, everything being relative. And my food. And I'd eat 2 meals a day. I mean, it was McDonald's every night because it was cheap, and it was a couple blocks from the hotel in San Francisco. Anyway, this class would run 3 weeks. I was the only one in there for an ocean operator license, you know, like 100 ton or 100 ton or less. My first license was a 50 ton license. Everybody else in that class were deep sea guys going for their 3rd mate, 2nd mate, chief mate, or master's license. So these guys are just doing all this stuff that is not relative to me, but I'm learning the rules of the road, and I'm learning kind of how to navigate and read a chart. And anyway, 3 weeks went by, everything just went over my head. I'm in a new environment, just trying to settle in, and after 3 weeks, I knew I was not ready to sit for my license. Things are just kind of starting to click, and I'm finally getting into a mode where I could study. Because those first 3 weeks, man, you want to go out, you want to explore. You know, on the weekends, you want to go explore the cable cars and go down to the waterfront. And so I went through the course for another about 2 weeks. And I was out of money. I was out of money, and it's like, okay, I'm going to go in the Coast Guard and sit for my license. Back then, you could just kind of take your paperwork in on the spot and give it to the chief behind the desk and do all the paperwork. Nowadays, for any kind of Coast Guard license, I mean, it's a package. I mean, it's a package of, it's a lot of work. Back then, yeah, you didn't. I think I needed a physical. I needed my FCC license. Anyway, I went in to take the test, and the chief behind the desk was this guy from Louisiana, Cajun guy, just rough, sitting across a big table. And here I'm a punk 21-year-old kid, you know, curly hair, and he goes over my sea time. And I think I needed 700, it's either 720 days of sea time or 730 days. Anyway, I was like 12 days short of the requirement for sea time. Back then, they didn't count a 12-hour day, a day and a half like they do now. One day, if it was 4 hours or 20 hours on a boat or 24 hours, it was only considered one day. Well, I only took 3 letters of sea time up there, just with the bulk of it. Well, when he added it up, I was short like 12 days. And he goes, you don't have enough time. And I said, well, I've got the time. I just, you know, nickel dime with Marauder and Steve Clark. And yeah, I had probably 40 or 50 other days. I just didn't have all these little nickel dime letters of sea time. So he says, take the test. And if you pass, go back and get the sea time, come back, and I'll give you your license. So I go in and I sit. And for the rules of the road, I think it was the rules of the road, you needed 90% to pass. Okay. 30 of those questions were inland rules of the road. 20 of them were, 30 international, 20 questions inland rules. Okay, so each question was worth 2 points. So give him my paper, you know, and he's got the test sheet there, and he's going right on down. Red mark. I knew I could miss 5, and I'd be in there anyway. I missed 6, 88%. 88%. Well, I'm thinking, he'll give it to me close enough. I looked at him, I go, oh, what does that mean? He goes, 30 days. come back in 30 days. So the first time trying to get my license, just get past the rules of the road. Didn't pass. Totally heartbroken. I walked back down to the hotel because my bags were behind the counter because I couldn't stay there anymore. I think I had like $6 in my wallet. I didn't even have enough money for a Greyhound bus ticket to come home. Grabbed my bag and my little books, walked down to the beginning of Bayshore Freeway, and stood there for probably 4 hours trying to hitchhike home. And the on-ramp downtown San Francisco went right up to the Bayshore Freeway. I don't know, it's not there now. It all went away in the earthquake. Anyway, I finally got a ride to come home, and I got dropped off in Atascadero probably about 11 o'clock that night. Anyway, that was probably the lowest point of my life. Came back, picked up a little side jobs fishing here and there, like with Mike or whoever, and spent another month just studying in my little studio apartment. Had my charts out, do my charts, the rules of the road. We're sitting around. I just do a couple of the flashcards a little bit at a time. Went back up exactly at 30 days. Borrowed my dad's truck this time, sign truck. Drove back up to San Francisco. Went in there. Same guy, same chief was behind the desk. And this time, the guy, it was like night and day. The first time he was just rough and gruff. Anyway, I came back the second time and he figured, okay, he's not just a punk, he's serious. So anyway, I was able to pass.
And then you got onto the Sea Venture 2 or 1.
The Sea Venture 1, actually, I'm trying to rewind. That wasn't, Sea Venture was here. The Sea Venture was here because I went up and worked with Fast Eddie and brought that boat down from Seattle. And that was before I had my license. So yeah, the intentions were going to Sea Venture 1. Anyway, somehow I ended up running the Flyer. Mike, who was the partner, I don't know if he was working in Avila running the Cheyenne, but I ended up on the Flyer. That was my first command, was running the Flyer. Full load on a Saturday morning. And my deckhand didn't show up. So someone else filled in for me. Help me out. Anyway, sorry. Don't mean to be long-winded.
No problem. What were some of the biggest issues or problems or struggles that you had when you were fishing? You said it was kind of like wide open. So was it more like, pricing, buying a boat, or maintaining the boat? Any regulation at all, or fees, etc.?
Not for the sport boats, not too much. Not the regulations. I think the biggest, we didn't even treat it like a job. I didn't. I was young. I mean, you had the world on a string. You had a lot of friends on the waterfront. You knew everybody on the waterfront. Like in the summertime, yeah, when it's feast or famine. In the wintertime, things would get slow, yeah, and you'd have to watch your nickels and dimes. Now they have seasons where they cut them off. I mean, at the end of the year, you can't fish until the end of May. Now they go and fish so many months out of the year. Back then it was 12 months around 12 months a year you could go fishing, but a lot of times it was the weather dictated, and it's too crappy, the bar's breaking. No, you're just going to sit at the rock and watch the waves break, and drink your coffee, smoke a cigarette. I don't know.
Do you think it's changed? Are there a lot more problems for sport fishers now than there were before? And if so, what kind of are they?
Well, yeah, besides just the price of fuel, just the price of everything is up. A couple of the guys that used to be our pinheads, guys that would go out fishing with us just to help. They were like 12 years old or 13 years old or 14 years old. These guys would they would ride the boat for free, and then when you get in, they would help clean the boat, and you had extra help. Anyway, there's one guy, he's still down there fishing. He's in his I don't know, got to be in his late 50s, or something. Anyway, he's down there fishing. The biggest thing, the problem I can see is, like this year, you catch limit, you can only have 2 vermilion reds. 2. It's not even worth your time driving over from Fresno or Bakersfield if you can only catch 2 reds and then a mixed bag. I mean, that was, the reds were the prized fish. Yeah, 2 fish. That doesn't even make me want to have any incentive to take my boat out if I ever get it fixed.
So regulation is really kind of shutting it down.
I don't really know if it's shutting it down. It makes fishing more, I don't know, I shouldn't say painful, but
frustrating.
Yeah. I was spoiled. We were spoiled back in the day. Not spoiled. It was a different world order.
Yeah, and going back to the question about just like the look of Morro Bay, I've been told that there's quite a few processors down there. Were they still in business while you were there, and why did they go out of, or you moved, but why did they go out of business? Or
well, they didn't really go out of business. There was a lot of draggers here in the 70s. I mean, there was a good fleet here. I mean, early on, the Corregidor, Art Johnson, and the Evelyn H. Blodgett, I can't think of his first name. Anyway, there was some draggers. There was a lot of fish coming across the dock, going up to Morro Bay Fisheries, going up right up the hill. As you go up the big hill on the right, there's a blue building there. I think it's got a surfboard that looks like a lure now. That was Morro Bay Fisheries, which was part of Breb's fishery that was also Prost Abalone's in the back. Where Gafco is, that T-pier used to belong to Morro Bay Fisheries. That's where they would offload. They would offload it, where Daguerre Moore is at now, and in the South T-pier. But yeah, there was a lot of fish coming across the dock, and then this big fleet of draggers came down from Northern California, and it was a lot of tonnage coming across the dock. And then they had Golden Nugget Fisheries, which was up behind Joe Giannini's there, behind Carla's restaurant. There was a big fish processing plant there.
And were you around in the area like for their, I guess, like closures or like early 2000s, late 90s, or did you already switched to the oil business?
I was already starting to work in the oil patch, but I was familiar with it because my days off I'd be down there and kind of knew what was going on, and of course it was in the news and everything else, and some of my mentors like Fast Eddie, and he was leading the charge on a lot of stuff, and then experimental dragging. But they bought the guys out, which you probably heard.
Mm-hmm. They kind of just killed part of the industry right there. With the buyout.
Yeah.
Did you participate in the catch share quota program?
No, that was never had anything to do with that.
Did you hear about if it was successful, or do you think that it was successful based on conversation with fishermen or news in the community?
I couldn't really comment on that. I'm too far out of the loop.
The regulation, as I'm talking to more and more people, seem to have been like the biggest stumbling block for fishermen on both sides, sport fishing and commercial. Do you think that there has been any good regulation that has come out that has helped fishermen, or I guess not harmed them, like the closure of the salmon season this year? Some people say it's good, some people say it's bad.
If the resource isn't there, you need to let it rebuild. I mean, it's painful being these guys, 2 years in a row. Maybe, I don't know, the guys you talk to, hopefully, now the drought's over, maybe in 3 or 4 years, something will rebound. They're tearing down some of the dams up in Northern California, maybe a little more water flow for the fish, but it'd be nice to see that salmon fishery come back. I did some salmon fishing in the season in it must have been, if I got my license in 74, December 74, it was a salmon season of 74, the spring of 74. I fished salmon with Fred Cephalou, which was one of the highliners around here. And that was a abundance of fish around then. Yeah.
So it looks quite different.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
To make up with the harbor.
Yeah, it's changed. Yeah, the infrastructure has changed. The harbor itself hasn't, but you know, the buildings and the old buildings are gone, the shacks are gone, and now everybody wants to put in the little motel units, you know.
Yeah.
It's coming along nice. It's nice. Unfortunately, the Embarcadero is only so wide. Those sidewalks that were brand new in 1971 or 72, those sidewalks aren't very wide for the amount of people who come to town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, you need 8-foot sidewalks, 10-foot sidewalks.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the tourism is damaging to the fishing business, seeing as like all these new shops are being built, kind of squeezing out the fishermen in that aspect, or do you think it's helping?
Not really. Not really. The Morro Bay, you've been here. It's a cool little town. We live in I'll admit it, we're in our own little bubble here. In California, we're in our own little bubble. It's the visitors that keep the wheels turning here. I don't think the tourists know, they haven't really pushed the fishermen out. No, not at all. The fishing industry is dwindling, but there's still some fish that come across the dock. It's not dead. When people say the fishing is a thing of the past around here, it's not, and that is what really chaps my behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some people are saying that, and like, well, Jeremiah, he doesn't think that there's a continuation of the fishing industry. If so many people are both aging out, and then also the pricing and everything for new guys to get into it is a big hindrance. So I guess
that's absolutely correct.
Yeah,
that's absolutely correct. And you know, whoever you talk to, yeah, a lot of guys, they don't want their sons to come up in fishing. It's a tough nut to crack.
But do you think that, in your opinion, you know, the fishing industry will die? Does mom and pop, or are they going to get bought out again, similar to the trawler?
I think there's enough little guys that would like to nickel dime, just smaller guys that just like to go fishing, get a little boat. They got a commercial license. They can go out and go fishing and bring it in and pay for their fishing addiction. Some of it. Now Billy Blue, that guy still grinds hard. You know, Bob Meharry, he's still grinding on the crabs. You know, during when they have a season, and those guys got train wrecked every time they turn around. They're getting $2 somehow.
Mm-hmm. Do you think? Well, I'm not sure if they have kids of their own or whatnot, but you saying, you know, a lot of parents like fishermen who are parents are telling their kids not to get into the fishing business. It was the case with Tocqueville. I'm not sure if you have kids, but if you do you think that they're, you know, are you going to encourage them to get into the industry?
I got 2 boys that are grown. They were born in 84 and 86, but no, they're not, never go fishing for a living. They got their own careers. I got one that's in the military. The youngest is in the military. He's an officer for 12 years, and he's going to probably work hopefully get to his 20, you know, get a 20-year retirement out of that. And he'll probably come back to Morro Bay. He likes the Central Coast. He likes hiking around here. And by that time, I'll probably need a caretaker. My oldest son is in Montana, and he hates California. And I don't, you know, I see where he's coming from. Mm-hmm. Don't have to worry about him coming back.
Yeah. And kind of moving to the catch limits to vermilion nowadays. It was like 4 or 5 last year, and they're doing this in belief that these fish numbers are going down, declining, and do you think that's true? Do you think that there's so little fish in the sea that they need to keep restricting back more and more?
From what I understand, the vermilion there's a lot of vermilions around have come back. I mean, it was pretty sketchy probably for 20 years, 25 years, but that resource has rebounded.
Mm-hmm. Do you think in the time that it was kind of getting sketchy, the fishermen that were fishing those, do you think that they took any action to kind of reel themselves back in, no pun intended, from overfishing these populations, if you believe in overfishing, the term?
I don't know if everybody thought it was kind of overfished. I mean, you get the scientists that come in and, they claim that it has, but hey, the fish might be over there, but they're experimenting over here. Who knows? Enough said on that. I could go out and catch a nice grade of fish if I wanted to, but I'm past that point now.
And could you talk a little more about your transition from the fishing industry to your the oil profession, I guess? Were you always fishing sport? You were a sport fisherman, or do you also do commercial?
I did some commercial fishing. You got to realize that a lot of the seasonal. It's a lot of stuff are seasonal. Some of these seasons might be 2 months or 3 months. But in my career, commercial fish, salmon with Freddie Cephalou, fished out of the city for probably 5 trips. And when I say out of the city, fishing Fairlawns from Point Reyes all the way down to Half Moon Bay, and then we rotate up to Eureka for the silver season. And so that was a salmon season. Fished some albacore as a deckhand. Did a pickup season down here of Dungeness crab here out of Morro Bay, which that was, I don't know if I have my license in or not. I'm trying to think. Anyway, that was Bill Blue. That was when I first met Bill Blue. That was his first job with Freddie and I. And Bill wanted to be a fisherman, and he stayed with it. And you look at him today, man, he's still grinding away. I admire that guy for that. But yeah, the salmon, the Dungeness crab fishing, and then a couple seasons albacore fishing, and like I said, we met the fleet coming back from Midway. We met them. They were on their way back from the South Pacific when we met up with them 900 to 1,000 miles off the Columbia River, and finished that up. And that, I think we tied the boat up in October. It was like October 15th. It must have been like 1981. And I wasn't really looking for a job. I was going to think about looking for a job maybe after the first of the year. And that's when I bumped into Scott Mather, who was a friend. That's another story that goes back to early sport fishing days. That's another story. Anyway, saw him sitting out at the rock. You used to be able to drive out to the rock on the far side, watch the waves, and here's Scott. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And what's going on? And he was running an oil boat down in Santa Barbara Channel. And he says, "Oh, you run a 75-footer," which seemed like a big boat at that time, 75-footer. And I casually said something, "Well, if anything ever comes up, let me know." So I go fishing with a friend, with John Dorman, who was a hook and line guy. His deckhand wanted to take a couple of trips off because he got married and wanted to travel a little bit. So John says, "Hey, you want to make a couple of trips with me?" I said, "Sure." He was also a partner in the Flyer when we owned the Flyer. And while I was out fishing with John, we were fishing down Point Arguello and down below there, and you gotta remember those cell phones back then. Scott's going to the payphone there, and Carpenter reappeared, calling my house. Nobody picking up, telling me, "Hey, give this guy a call, give his boss a call. He's got a job." So I'm sitting at the dining room table one morning, and he comes knocking on the front door, and he's mad. And he goes, "You want a job or not?" And he slams his phone number down. He says, "Call this guy." You know, he's been telling he has his friend, but here a week later, his friend is not showing up or calling. So I called the guy up, and he wanted to know if I could be in Port Hueneme tomorrow, which was the day before Thanksgiving. And I said, "I have plans for Thanksgiving." He goes, "Can you be there on Friday?" So I went down and found the boat I was supposed to find in Port Hueneme, and went to work for 5 days with one crew, and then Scott came back, and he was the captain, and I was Scott's deckhand.
So you worked with him for
Yeah, until he jumped ship and went to another company, you know. But I stayed with it, and yeah, that worked out really well for me, because like I said, the oil patch was starting to pick up when Ronald Reagan opened up all those lease sites. Rewind back when doing the hook and line fishing, before they started a lot of the exploratory drilling, there was a lot of the seismic boats that came in. And the seismic boats, in my personal opinion, really hurt the fishery.
What's the difference? Like, what do the seismic boats do? They surveying kind of?
The surveying, they're airboats. We used to call them gunboats. I mean, they're just towing a cable 2 miles behind the boat, and just these blasts of compressed air that vibrates down into the seafloor, and they can map the seafloor. Anyway, those things it's intense, you know.
Kill the sea life below, yeah.
Who knows? But it ain't good. But you could be on a spot. Fishing is good. If it's not epic, it's good fishing. One of these boats could be 15 miles over the horizon coming your way, and basically you'd see the stack of fish just kind of peter out. And from going for, you know, if you're fishing 60 hooks and getting 59 fish, you go from that to maybe 1 or 2 on the bottom. And yeah, that was an issue. Seismic boats, I don't care what they say, is not happy for the sea life. You can have some of these guys who were diving abalones and urchins. What do you hear when they're in the water? They'll come out of the water just because of the.
Was there any danger of, like, you know, pressure and all that? Like when sonar goes off with a scuba diver?
I couldn't tell you what happened, but there's stories, good guys, I won't say any of their names, but that, yeah, basically up and out of the water, you know, when the seismic boats came around. And I mean, those boats could be, you know, 12, 15 miles away.
Wow.
So, yeah. You think it hurts the whales? Yeah.
Was there any, like, pushback against those? You know, all the pushback is against fishermen. They're killing sea life. Was there any for those seismic boats?
Not really. Not really. You got to remember, every oil company had their own seismic boat because they're mapping the seafloor. They don't know what little plot they want to buy. Those lease sites were 3 miles by 3 miles when they would bid them off. And I mean, the ocean is basically just a big checkerboard. And you've got 6 different oil companies, you know, Occidental maybe, Phillips, Chevron, Exxon, Unocal. I'm trying to think of who else. Anyway, each oil company has their own seismic boat, and they're mapping all this. Anyway, their results are highly secretive, you know, because they want that block there. That one has potential. There's 3 over there that don't have any potential. So these oil companies bid on these blocks by their information, you know, what block might produce the most. And then, of course, the exploratory ships come out. First, there was a couple drill ships that came, and like I said, fishing with John, leaving Morro Bay in the wee hours of the morning and heading on down to Point Arguello, and it's not even daybreak, and it's like you see these lights down there. It's like, what is that? What is that? And the closer you get, it's a big lit up drill tower. Okay. A couple weeks, a week goes by and you go back down there. Now there's two of them. And these drill ships basically have anchor patterns and pennant wires that go out about 3/4 of a mile on each side. Okay. So you got the drill ship in the middle and these crown buoys all the way around. They're taking up about 1.5 miles of that fathom curve that you want to fish on, because you're not supposed to go inside their buoy pattern. So yeah, there was a lot of animosities. Yeah, and at that time, yeah, I was like everybody else. Fishermen hated the oil companies, rightfully so. Well, 6 months later, after watching them guys go by, it's like, hey, the wind's blowing, and those guys are making a paycheck. We'd be sitting there in Coho, our ice would be melting, eating our groceries, not making a dime. And pissed off a few guys around here, but my close friends, they didn't care how I made a living. And actually, they stood up for me when guys would start bagging in the coffee shop. I was a trader, going to work in the oil patch. And I got some friends that told him, hey, he can do whatever he wants. Those guys are still my good friends to this day.
Yeah. And you mentioned, just before that, you were running that boat, what was it, Columbia Rivermouth with the South Seas fishery, the guys that come back from Midway. Was there any conversation you had with them about, like, if it was successful, if it was plausible to go, all the way out there to try fishing?
That was up and come budding. That was a up and coming fishery. That was it had been experimental, a few years before that, and they found that it was productive and worthwhile. And there's a bunch of boats right there on that picture up there. There's a lot of guys. Probably half those boats went to South Pacific. And these guys built some of the big boats.
What were you targeting at the time?
It was all albacore, hook and line, jig fishing. And I don't know, there was probably maybe 30 guys or more. I'm not the guy to tell you about who all went past the date line. But some of them, they went down to the Roaring Forties. That's the southern latitudes, almost below New Zealand. They fished this, down in the Roaring Forties, and they topped the boat off. It was a 10-day run back to Samoa just to offload at the cannery. But no, I didn't participate in any of that. But that was a big fishery, and guys guys did that probably for at least 20 years.
Wow.
Big boats.
Are there any names that come to mind, or anyone that lives around here, or just anyone in general that I could get in contact with about that?
Jack Carpenter, if you can get a hold of him, he's a quiet guy, great guy, but he had one of the big 100-footers, and then he turned his boat off. He just leased it off to another guy, Jack Carpenter. He's still around. That's the only one I can think of right at hand. But yeah, he's a local guy. I don't know how you get hold of Jack, but yeah, he's a quiet guy, but he could tell you all about it. And he was the thick of it.
Yeah, and kind of switching topics once again.
Sure.
The fishing community, I've been told, is like so very fraternal. Everyone's helping each other, but now I've been hearing some comments that the fishing industry now is more closed off, more competitive, obviously due to buying like the permits and whatnot. I'm wondering, is that how you feel about it? Has it changed the feel of the community? Are they more cutthroat?
That question, I can't answer that question because I'm so separated for that. You know, I couldn't comment on that.
Well, how was it like when you were fishing? Um,
It was competitive back then, but you didn't have the rules and regulations. They didn't have the limited entry. Just as I was getting out of thinking of leaving the fishery, and like I said, started working in the oil patch, there was a drift net fishery out here that was supposed to be targeting like the thresher sharks. Well, the incidental was the swordfish, and well, that was a market for that. And look, you didn't need permit. You just, if you had the capital, you'd get a net. Put, you know, the net. It was a big capital investment to get the drift net and stuff like that and go fishing. And then a lot of guys jumped into that fishery, and then of course then they kind of started with the limited entry on that. But yeah, it's it's like a gold rush, or what do you call it? Yeah, gold rush, and then things kind of peter out, and then they realize, yeah, there's a lot of guys doing this.
Do you think there's still an interest in the community to go fishing? Embarcadero is just kind of all closed off because of fishing. Measure D. Do you think there's still an interest in the community, not just the fishing community, but Morro Bay, to sustain the fishermen and help them out?
Morro Bay needs to keep that dream alive. That's what Morro Bay sells itself on. Coastal, small community, fishing community. And that's why people come. I mean, people come down, they enjoy watching people offload fish. They enjoy watching the guys work on their boats. Of course, there's a lot of sea otters. The sea otters are the big attraction now. Who would have thought? Sea otters weren't everybody's friend, 30, 40 years ago. So with that said, yeah, you need to keep that image. Keep the image.
Do you think they're doing a good job at it? Or an okay job?
Well, right now, you can see as you go down the Embarcadero, you drop down Beach Street, there's 6 slips there, they're all being repaired. So as you drop down to Beach Street, you don't see Toggy's boat, you don't see Bob Meharry's boat. A couple other guys sold, but yeah, as you drop down the hill there, first you see those fishing boats. Actually, there are some right at the very bottom of the hill, with the fishing fleet. And then you go on around towards the South T Pier. People like to see the boats. People like to see the boats. The women, have you walked the Embarcadero at all?
I have.
And have you read a lot of those little informational boards?
I actually haven't, no.
Best thing this town ever did. Starting, we call it Toggy's Corner out by Coleman Drive. Okay, past the PG&E plant, the inlet, I call it the inlet plant. Read those boards. Stop and read them. And then coming back by the South T Pier, it'll explain about tuna fishing. It'll explain crab fishing. It'll explain salmon fishing. And people walk that little boardwalk there, looking at the sea otters. And Nick's bench is down there with a memorial to Nick, who was the Morro Bay mechanic that kept everybody running. Read that. That's worthwhile. Put that in your report.
Yeah, I'll
No, I'm serious.
I'm going down there just after this, so I can go take a look at those.
Yeah, and take some pictures of them. That's probably the best information you'll get right there.
Good to know.
And I think the women for fisheries did that. In the city, of course, they had to get a permit through the Coastal Commission to put these boards there, but interesting. And I mean, the Maritime Museum, have you been inside the Maritime Museum?
Yeah, that's how I met Scott, actually.
Did he have you watch the videos?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting. I should promote those in my videos. I'll let the viewers know.
Oh, totally. And then Did he tell you about they got on the 20th at the Morro Bay Theater?
Yeah.
You get a ticket yet?
Abalone.
Yeah.
I did not get a ticket, but when I was talking with Scott at his house, they just put it on their TV for me, so I got.
Oh, okay, you've seen it because I got a DVD there if you want it. I mean, to check it out.
They also put it on a hard drive for me, so I
You're
got it.
you're top shape. That's cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it was really nice of them to
Yeah.
do that for me.
Yeah, Lori did a really nice job on that. But that goes back. There's some history, and at the time, I interacted with a lot of those people, and you didn't realize that. Hey, this dealing with historical people there.
Mhm.
You know, like Frank Brebs, way back when he had the Hornet. You know, he's the guy that co-signed a loan for me to get my license. At that time, I had no idea his background went so deep.
Yeah, it's cool being able to talk to these people. The fishing community is so connected, and recommend someone else, and that person knows someone else. It's really cool. Yeah. With that being said, is there anyone else I can talk to that you know of that's still in the industry besides the ones that I've?
Well, Billy's a must. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. Bob is a wealth of information, and I mean he goes back old school. His father-in-law was the highliner and one of the most respected men on the West Coast. And you know, Bob's a good guy. I don't know if it'd be Jack. I mean, for the South Pacific, that's the only guy I can think of.
What was his last name?
Jack Carpenter.
Is there anyone else? Anyone maybe diving? Anyone that dove?
Randy Can. Have you talked to him? I mean,
No, Jeremiah was going to give me his number.
yeah. Okay, Randy's the other guy. Randy. Last of the Mohicans, man.
Funny you mentioned that. Trudy just said that as well. He was talking about the Liars lunch that just happened.
Yeah, and there's kind of a odd story. Make it quick. How that started out. That was during the early days of the pandemic when everybody was on lockdown. One of our other friends, who was a fisherman for years out of here and worked in the oil patch, a master mariner, who actually was my best man when I got married. We had maintained friendship. Anyway, he would come back to Morro Bay. He's living up outside Reno. Anyway, he would come back to Morro Bay to do these spot jobs for Marine Logistics. Some of these boats that would go down and do these jobs outside San Clemente Island or San Nick or whatever on a workboat for Frank. Anyway, before he'd leave to go home, he'd call Scott and say, "Hey, let's get some breakfast." Well, Scott would call me and say, "Hey, Blaine's in town. Let's get some breakfast." So we'd go over to the French bakery, get something to eat, and we'd go sit behind the museum. Okay, because the Embarcadero's dead, but we go sit behind the museum, out of sight, out of mind, and we just sit on the bench. Anyway, then next time you'd be down, a couple more people would join. And then we actually got out of a little plastic table. We sat down at a table and 2 chairs, and it was like 5 of us. And then it grew to be like 8. And then it kind of morphed to where it was Liars Lunch on the second Wednesday of the month. But, you know, we were just looking for a place that had some peace and quiet where we could flap our gums, you know. And this last one they had was the first one of the year. That's the first one I've missed because I had a doctor's appointment.
So it's been happening since the pandemic, every Wednesday.
Yeah, actually officially for about maybe going on a year and a half or 2. I took a little time off during the winter, but that was something else. Go to there and you'd see guys you haven't seen in 35 years.
cool
which was
experience.
really cool. And I mean, that brought a lot of the community back, and a lot of retired guys. Oh, just about everybody. Well, retired curmudgeons, you know.
Mm.
So anyway, I hope I didn't talk too much.
No. And the last question I was going to ask you is that, what are some of your favorite memories or memorable experiences that you had out in the water? Any big storms or big fish, breakdowns, anything like that comes to mind?
Yeah, almost rolled the boat over crab fishing with a full load of crab pots. That was definitely a pucker factor when the boat rolls and all the gear shifts to one side and the boat doesn't come back, and foul weather, and the captain was able to get the boat turned around to go down swell, and I'm on the back deck trying to shift as much weight as I can to the other side to correct it, which is a lot. Anyway, you see your life flash before you. I mean, it's the pucker factor, and your life does flash before you. That's not just a saying. I mean, everything in a matter of 10 minutes. But we made it, made it safe back down to Bodega, anchored up late at night. Went in the Bodega Bay the next morning. Bob, hopefully you will talk to, it was his father-in-law. Bob was going to take the truck up, so we were taking the boat up, and he was going to follow with the truck. Anyway, he met us in Bodega Bay there, and we unstacked all the pots, took half the pots, and made the trip, the boat up to Crescent City, and the other remainder pots were going to go on a semi and make it up to Crescent City. That was a close one. In the oil patch there, yeah, I had just some bizarre nights where it's just like, you didn't think you were going to make it through the night. I mean, just foul. I mean, going backwards, trying to jog into it, go this way, go this way, go this way, and basically you're getting pushed back, pushed back, pushed back, and working in the oil industry, it's a whole different mindset. You know, the guys up on the rigs and the guys running these projects, they're not boat guys. You know, so it's like, oh no, you got to be here because of the regulatory permits, and I kind of knew part of that. Well, there was a big storm coming, and I knew it. And by the time they said, "Hey, you can get out of here," it was too late. And basically, it was a survival night. I still carry the weather report from Sharon Graves, who used to be the KSBY meteorologist. I carry that little report in my wallet to this day. Yeah, it was hurricane force winds. I mean, yeah, and only about from, was grumpy all night, but from about 10 at night until 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, it's like, mom's gonna be pissed. Yeah, mom's gonna be pissed. Anyway, got kudos from my boss, because we limped back into Port Hueneme after that night when the weather finally came down, and we went into Port Hueneme. Everything in the Santa Barbara Channel was just upside down. I mean, lights in Ventura, Santa Barbara, trees, everything was just gone. Anyway, we come limping into Port Hueneme about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and my immediate supervisor is there on the dock to meet me, along with the owner of the company, and Johnny Trot, come up to the car, because we need to go to Port Hueneme Supply and get some stuff. And I told Johnny, I says, hey, if you want to fire me, I'm good with it. Fire me, I'm good with it. And he goes, I probably would if it was anybody else. That's how much we got along. He respected me, and I respected him. I had worked with him years before when he was a captain, but and then the boss was there, and he says, I'd rather lose a contract than lose a crew. So after that, the oil companies, they kind of had a little wake up call on that one, you know, because everything's safety first. You know, that was that Swartz project I was talking about. Touched a whale.
Came up on the boat.
No, touched a whale right on the forehead. We were anchored off. We were out at Platform Harvest, hanging out, swinging on the mooring on Scott's old boat, Mr. Clean 2. I think Scott had moved on by then. Flat, calm day, and just out of boredom, I'm standing on the back of the boat, a 130-foot boat, and I'm just wiping tools off a WD-40, you know, putting them back in a toolbox that was back in a compartment back there. Just standing there wiping off tools, and there's a transom right here. And this humpback just comes right up. Just treading water, comes straight up from me, from closer than me to you. And he's got his head's out of the water about this far. And that's about how high the deck of the boat was. And he's got his big flippers just going like that. And it's like, I was in shock. Anyway, he kind of slid back down and he came back up. And when he came back up, I got down on my knees and went, push him right on the head. Just like, if I can get up here, just like a big blubber, just push him. I was, what are the odds? He was checking me out and I was checking him out and he didn't mind me pushing on his head. I mean, this is the stern of the boat right there. Anyway, he slipped back down. By this time, I go back and I'm yelling at the Merle and Vern, who's the captain and chief engineer. I'm going, hey man, check this out, check this out. So back then he had the VHS cameras. So Merle had this VHS camera because this whale was just kind of orbiting around the boat. Well, anyway, the rest of the guys are sitting in the galley. Now everybody's coming out and they're up on the upper deck looking at this whale and he's off the side. Merle's got the camera, and that whale blows. Anyway, Ken yells out the F word as loud as he can. Man, that stinks. You know? Anyway, we played that video probably 100 times. Listen to Kent Creighton, you know? So that was one of them. There's just a lot of epic days on the ocean. You know, when the fishing's good, you're high. You got to the point where, you know, people go to see whales. You see so many whales, you kind of ignore them. You don't.
Become commonplace.
Pardon?
It just becomes
They
commonplace.
just become common, you know, and it's even like the seals, you know, the big knotheads, you know, you see down there. You'd be doing a safety meeting up on the bridge and you'd have a new guy. And you're doing the safety meeting and he's gawking at the seals or the sea life. And it's like, hey, pay attention here, you know. So,
what did that whale feel like when you touched them?
just rubber blubber, just like, you know, just big black, just black like a hard inner tube. You know, but that's, you know, I know people swim with whales, but he was checking me out and I was checking him out. What are the odds?
That's
You know,
awesome.
it's a hard story to believe, but it's God's honest truth.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So
Every time I talk with another person, it makes me want to go out in the water, join a crew or something.
well, as the saying goes, I've got a chief engineer, a good friend I sailed with for years. Actually, he's in this picture right here. So, yeah, this is him right here. This is Pat. That's a picture, we call that the Mr. Clean 3 Hair Club for Men. Anyway, that's the chief. I sailed with him for 20 years. He's one of my best friends. All those guys are my best friend. Perry's dead, but it's like once you roll your bones in the ocean, it's hard to go back. And that's true. Okay, that thing's still rolling there. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well.
And then here's the remake. A couple of years ago. It's just Perry's passed, and that was Mark. He was the new engineer, but this was JR's wedding up in Oregon, and you can see what he had on his man cave.
That's
Yeah, you have friends for life, you know. You have friends for life. And this guy here, Mark, he was my mate for a gazillion years, and then when I was the port captain for that fleet of aluminum boats, he was my opposite. So he'd work 2 weeks on, I'd come up, I'd relieve him, he'd go home for 2 weeks. And yeah, so yeah, these guys are still best friends. They're like Bill and Bob. Bill and Bob Harry, best guys, friends. You know, Mark Down his ink. We a lot of miles under the keel.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate
hey,
talking to you. Thanks for having me.
well, hey, hope I didn't gab too much, man.
Any input's good input.
Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah.
Well, I'll look around. I'd have to talk to Frank. The South Pacific, Jack Carpenter, if he's around and available. He's really quiet, real quiet. But he's the guy that.
It's been around the block.
Yeah, he was in on it. He was in on it, and a highly respected fisherman too.